Thank you, Marion. I'm going to give a general introduction to the kind of works we've been doing in north part of Cyprus. And then I'm going to pass on to Ian, who will talk about stratigraphy, phasing, dating, and interpretation of Akanthou and other aceramic sites that we've been involved with. Our area of project, Akanthou, the main site is positions on the north coast of Cyprus. And the area of research that covers in my talk today is approximately all of this area. It's actually Akanthou municipality borders, but it's a little bit extended version of that. So first of all, I want to start from a site that's a ceramic Neolithic, which is on the west coast of Cyprus, which is on the west of Akanthou. And then I want to briefly mention a few other sites that we are working on, namely, if I can just close, namely Akanthou and Cara, Burun. Besides two aceramic rescue excavations and one ceramic Neolithic rescue excavations, we do also a regional field survey and also underwater documentation survey. I'm sorry to start not a very pleasant photograph, but this is realities of the area we are working in. This site, Archaeopark, was discovered in 1996 during my PhD survey, which I would like to say how important surveys are. You get to find the sites and eventually you get to have them scheduled. This site was also scheduled. It was a protected site, but unfortunately, first of all, the road constructions took part of it, and then eventually took another part in 2002, 2007, 2010, 2000. So gradually, the site got eaten up by machinery. And I want to point out something extremely important here. This is one of my team members standing here in the photograph. And please note the depths of deposit that we have here. And it was about 10 meters height of deposit. This is something I've never seen or heard in archaeology of Cyprus. Usually the shifting, drifting of settlements means not so deep deposits, but this was like a kind of höyük, except that it was not a höyük in Cyprus. And the site had, let's have a look at what we have. After it was bulldozed for the fourth time, we did a short period of rescue excavations. And here you can see all the damaged soil. We had to also sieve through the damaged soil to find ceramics and other small finds. We managed to do a geophysical survey, which you can see beautifully how the architecture is present, even although more than half of the deposit is gone, bulldozed away. We managed to get one radiocarbon, and the date is under myself. I cannot see my notes here, unfortunately. It's 6th millennium BC. We have milk bowls, jugs, painted pottery. We have of late Neolithic and Chalcolithic. We also found in a section a burial, intact burial, which was laid on the pebble surface. So all this information, perhaps the fact that we don't have continuous settlements in Cyprus, here we could have had the answer perhaps between late Neolithic and Chalcolithic period. I'm starting with this because the rest of the story I will tell will follow on the basis of protecting the landscape. So the next stop is at Agios Georgios. It's a fossil site, pygmy hippo site. It was a collaboration project with Tim Bromwich and Victoria Harridge. Tim Bromwich from New York University and Victoria Harridge from, at the time, London Natural Museum. It was part of a Mediterranean project, fossil project, for dating fossil sites. Unfortunately, we don't have any dates, although I have a date on the corner. It's just generally how we date Cypriot Pleistocene sites. We looked for human and animal relationship, but there was no human relationship from the excavations, just jumbled up bones of hippopotamus as if a flood has come and thrown it on the side of the river valley. However, this site is very important because within the area of Akanthou, where we are doing protection and where we aim eventually to describe the whole chronology of the island, this site will play an important role as the first phase of prehistoric Cyprus on the island. So the next stop is Akanthou. Akanthou, Tatlısu, Çiftlikdüzü was again part of my PhD survey research. Actually, my thesis was on Kyrenia district, and I was looking through the thesis of Stanley Price, where I was relocating all the prehistoric settlements in Kyrenia district. And when I eventually came to the end of the page and turned it, Famagusta became, the first site was Akanthou. And I noticed that surface finds of obsidian were found on the site previously. And this is the time, early 90s, when Jean Guillain and his team were excavating in Shipwreck, finding early Neolithic sites, obsidian, which reaches to almost 500, picrolites, cattle bones. So it was thanks to their excavation research that I was aware that obsidian was important. So I took my team over to this site, and in our first visit, we came across an unfortunate incident. Here, this is the site on the 15th level, 15-meter elevation. This seems to be standard for almost all Neolithic sites that I've come across along the north coast. And over here, you see the Taurus Mountains of Turkey. So an aerial view, you can see the damaged site. It was a chicken farm. And when the incubator stopped working, the farmers decided to dig up holes and bury all the chicken entrance there. So when we arrived in 96, there were chicken pits and freshly dug out soil. And we decided to just sift through all this soil and see whatever we can find. Perhaps if they were not freshly dug, I would have never found anything and turned my back and walked away. So fortunate and unfortunate somehow follows each other. So this unfortunate event resulted in fortunate event of us discovering 40 obsidian blades, fallow deer antlers, and some really large bones, which were later identified by Louis Martin, confirmed by Louis Martin, and also an Edinburgh archaeozoologist as cattle. So cattle, picrolite, obsidian, these were the key things that were coming from Shipwreck and already tickled us that this may be an early and important site. So in 1999, we did a massive project with my students. They didn't know the difference between excavation and sieving. So all one summer for several months, we just sieved all the spoil heaps and obtained more picrolite objects, lot of animal bones, antlers, small finds, and the obsidian number shot up to more than 400 in one go. When I took the idea to Department of Antiquities to protect the site, they said, oh, well, but maybe the architecture is completely gone. So how do you know that there is something preserved there. So how can we preserve something that is not there? So it was an open door for me to apply for my excavation permit. So with the excavation permit, we were able to use this to our advantage and train students also. We used in London Museum recording method, single context recording technique, 100% dry sieving, and also soil sampling from all contexts. Perhaps this 100% sieving helped us to recover all those thousands of obsidian that Marion mentioned before my talk. So we have, architecturally, we have 6 buildings. Ian will go into detail more. And we have plastered floor, where all houses are built on it. Stone foundation, mud brick, here you can see the mud bricks, mud brick walls, also plastered basins, which seems to be occurrence on the floor level, which are very important to the site and significant, and also a ditch. The ditch, again, Ian will go into detail, is 2 meters deep, 5 meters wide, and it seems to circle around the part of the settlement we are excavating. We have some human remains, but they are not from burials. We are praying for a aceramic Neolithic burial site, cemetery. They are fragmentary, mainly cleaned from the floors and thrown into the ditch. Only partially complete, but very partially complete skeleton we have belongs to a woman with an extended arm here, some vertebra and rib bones and part of a skull. Other than that, we have animal bones. Our animal bone expert is Nadia Pölak. She is with us today to answer any questions that may raise from here. We know that Tatlısu people were herders of sheep. Majority of the animals that they were feasting on were fallow deer, followed by goat, sheep, pig, and cattle. We have also dog and a cat and fox. Besides these, we also have birds. They're not many in numbers, but they are of variety and is worth to mention. Quails and cormorants seems to be the dominant birds we have, and the rest of the birds as great bustard and jackdaw, crows, and quite a few water birds. We also have fish remains. We are by the sea, it's natural. We have albacore, bonito, bass, many, but out of marine animals we have, turtle is the most important, if you ask me, because we have almost 8 complete carcasses of turtles found just thrown into the ditch. We have quite a few vertebrae of the fish for identifying the fishes we have. We have also fish hooks, and one of them, which is again under the drawing that I cannot close, and one of them is a whitewashed, and this has been identified as our specialist that is purposely made to shine underwater to attract the fish. The botanical remains are studied by Dr. Müge Ergün by flotation technique. She's recovered 2 domesticated einkorn barley and emerit. We have also lentil peas, and with fruits we have olive, pistachia, celtis, plum, almond, Malvia as a wild species of plant, which we have today in Cyprus, and we eat it a lot. And this celtis is another fruit that's found. Pigrolite is a local stone and comes from Troodos Mountains. It's a very soft and easily workable stone. We have a lot of what is called thimbles, quite a few thimbles of various sizes. We have also these round objects with hashes and gummy-looking black burnt or pigrolite. This one is not a pigrolite, but because it's hashed like the other stones, I put it in there. Now, these thimbles or artifacts, objects, has been suggested by Jean Guillain, and I have to say I agree with him that they could be what is called in the Middle East a kuafa, a miniature boat made of tree trunks and covered with skin and floating. This is used in Tigris and Euphrates. And this example is actually from Tibet with a different shape, not a round one, and different shape. So this could have been a vessel. Other colleagues working in Cyprus suggested different kinds of sea crafts also. We have shell beads, quite a lot of dentalium as well, but I haven't had a chance to put a picture here. The shell beads seems to play quite an important common role in Cypriot Tatlısu society. Also, we have other beads, pendants from the site. Particularly carnelian is of importance and interest to some of you who are watching today. And green stone, or it's been told that they are jasper, but whenever we call a geologist to identify the rock, they threaten to break it to look at it. That seems to be their only way of understanding what stone it is. We also have a good repertoire of bone needles and handles, bone tools. Stone tools or objects of variety again. This one is very similar design to Kyrokitia. We have again hatch. This one is a bowl fragment with a pierce through it. So it must have been broken during its use time and then fixed. We have examples of this again, Kyrokitia, that objects, when stone object is, or bowl is broken, it's pierced from both sides and attached back. This one is a pumice. Pumice can be found along the coast of Cyprus, probably from volcanic eruptions, and it floats and arrives to Cyprus. We don't have it in our geology. And because the distance between, let's say, Crete is very long to travel, they tend to be very small fragmentary, and you can pick them up even today on the west coast of Cyprus, the Kormakiti area. This one is quite large, and it was used for grinding down or sanding down something. And I want to raise a question of perhaps this was also brought with the obsidian on the island, as pumice and obsidian sources tend to be found together. And this brings us to the most important find of Tatlısu, Akanthou obsidian. We have mainly pressure technique and some bipolar techniques. Majority of the technology, majority of the industry, flint industry, is flint and chert, and in comparison to obsidian. But however, we do have almost 5,000, more than 4,000, 5,000 obsidian blades. They're all arriving to the island as finished products, and we have two sources for them. 90% of them come from Central Anatolia, Cappadocia, Göllüdağ, Nenezi, and a few has been attested to Alatepe in Bingöl Bay area. Our obsidian and the other chipstone are studied by Nurcan Kayaca. And now, this is where our excavation trench is, and the geophysical survey that we were only able to do up to this point shows that the site is immense for aceramic sites. And from the surface finds, where we are even out here, we are finding surface obsidian. It's quite a large site. So considering only 2% has been excavated and thousands of obsidians are discovered, you can perhaps do a little calculation of your heads how much more obsidian can be discovered on this site. Now the next aceramic site, Cara Burun, this is our main site. Akanthou is just 1 kilometer to here. In 2019, we decided to set a little trench because there were agricultural plowing every year on this site. We discovered it in 2011 during our surveys. From the surface finds, it was quite strange. It didn't fit anything Neolithic that I knew. There were no pottery. It didn't look like Tatlısu, Akanthou. It was really different, particularly the grinding stones. They were like tortoises and could fit into your hand. They were so small. So a little trench was set, and perfectly a house appeared underneath. And a lot of finds were found in these foundations all along here that I will show now. The flint is flake industry. We seem to find quite a lot of these rounded stones. We also find it in Tatlısu as well. This is one of the hand-fitting grinding stones that I mentioned. We also have very interesting repertoire of shell beads and then thallium and another stone bead here. We had only one carbon dating, which predated it to Tatlısu. I mentioned that we are also doing underwater documentation and survey. We have done along the coast where there are prehistoric sites, namely the Akanthou, Tatlısu, as well as Cara Burun. And in the sea, we came across grinding stones and also the round stones that I mentioned, also worked flint, quite a few artifacts actually under the water. Is this part of a submerged settlement, or is it just erosion? For the time being, we have to say that it's erosion, although some of them are quite distant. But the sea is also can have big waves and can turn things or push things around, but stone, I don't know. So further let's put a comma and further investigation. I do wish to find a site, a Neolithic site like Atlit Yam, but time will show this. And Cara Burun is very near a bay, and this bay was surveyed, and all along here we found a lot of anchors. Some of them are dating to the late Bronze Age. Just briefly mentioning the richness of the area. And now the Akanthou Aphrodisian, the historically even recorded in Geographia. This is the ancient harbor, a temple site, and a settlement built over. Unfortunately, classical sites were not within our interest when we were little bit I don't know, we should have been more aware of these classical sites as well. How much we could have stopped this tourist development going on, I don't know, but it's a shame that the settlement is built over now. And on the right is the rock-cut tombs cemetery site. All these artifacts around are found along the coast, eroding into the sea, and also under the water. So not surprisingly, an ancient harbor around the area, we also found the Roman shipwreck. And this needs to be, this also was protected, which I will talk about it later. But this area is rich in underwater land. Is this specifically for the area, or is it just our area, or it's the islands Weibing? I'm not quite sure. But we also found the copper ingots underwater. These are corresponding very well with land that we have a Roman site, we have a Bronze Age site, we have all these periods that we're finding in the water as well as on the land. So we do have, with the Pygmy Hippo, ceramic Neolithic, aceramic, later periods, 19th century, churches of 15th century. It seems to be within the district region of Akanthou. We can actually talk about the history of 10,000 years of history, the chronological order within this area. So what have we done? Initially, this is the excavation area of Akanthou Tatlısu. We have declared the whole area as ancient monument. They call it the first degree, and to be protected. Eventually, we expanded this gradually into all these areas that you see is in red, extending it to about 4 kilometers in length. And also, for the first time, we declared under the water or bays as ancient monument. But as I have shown you the extent of Archaeopark, the Neolithic site, being protected on a paper means nothing. You can, in one night, find a villa development on it, or a truck can come and bulldoze it to build a road. One problem we always had as prehistorians working in Tatlısu is whenever we had visitors and we showed them there's a house here, they gave us this strange look like we don't see it, we don't understand. I often also had people coming and telling me that I'm digging in the wrong place. I should go and dig in Salamis, or I should go and dig in Solis, because visibility of these sites are more than the prehistoric sites. Because of this, reconstruction is extremely important and valuable. As the Chinese proverb says, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So starting from this, in 2005, we've got a small grant from UNDP in Cyprus. My students took time to mix the mud, mold the mud, and we've got a great help with a local craftsman, Ismail Jamal. I would like to mention his name, a man who thought like a Neolithic. And we were able to create this wonderful reconstruction, all based on the evidences we found at Akanthou excavation, and things we didn't find. We followed what other excavation sites found in their excavations. Our greatest visitors, my favorite part now, are the students, 10 years old particularly. And whenever we are excavating, schools do come and visit us. And I have to say that these kids are much more interested than the adults, and they come with questions that we sometimes hesitate in answering and wondering why we never thought of the question. And this is, here is Müge, our archaeobotanist specialist, explaining them how we derive data. And here they are visiting the hut. Here, Nurcan, our Obsidian specialist, explaining them all about the flint industry and how it's made. And here is a little girl pointing out the artifacts and saying, are these from the world you explained to us, meaning the site? So thinking all of these and the destruction of the sites on the paper, we had to do something. And we came up with the Archaeopark Project. It has been designed several times, but it's still been under construction or planning. Being a pioneer is not very easy in North Cyprus. Everything is done for the first time, and we still haven't clarified who will sign the papers for the planning permit. The land belongs to government, yet they pass the responsibility to the Department of Antiquities, who pass it to others, and so on. Once we sort this out, we would like to establish a Neolithic village, just like Aşıklı in a way, with a small museum and children's workshops, and where people can actually come, especially the young people, and we can tell them about archaeology and what really it is. Because we have a problem also, particularly with underwater, that because nobody is doing underwater survey or researches, it's seen as open field. And there are some groups who think that they can do the job of an archaeologist, whether it's surveying or occasionally lifting artifacts from the sea. When this project happens, because we have the funding by the university, it's now under drawing. We are hoping we will create a sustainable project here where the income can pour back into the excavation. Because one of the problems we have is not being able to continue to excavate. Unfortunately, government is not interested or aware of the importance of the excavation, and there are only 2 excavations on the island, on the north, not more. And because of lack of funding, we can excavate 1 year, then stop for 2, then we lose our team. But now, thanks to Mihriban Hocanım, I would like to extend my thanks to her. She very voluntarily lent me her team. And I think this is a perfect opportunity where Anatolian archaeologists can work in Cyprus, because most often Cypriot archaeologists don't know Anatolia, and the vice versa. So I would like to pass it on to Ian now for the phasing, dating, and interpretation.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. I think what I'll do is add a little bit of detail to everything Müge said, and focus on some things that you might find of interest. One thing that's amazed me in the 20 years or so I've been helping Müge is one, the damage, the frightening amount of damage that's been done to archaeology, but also what survived. Now Müge showed us the picture, aerial image showing the chicken pits and the agricultural damage. And I've just added to that you see the blue rectangle, that is our rescue trench. And the rough area of the site as we've defined it is within the blue line. I suspect there is also, the site continues under the buildings, and from field survey we think it extends east as well. So as Müge said, really we're looking at probably 2% of the site has been touched by our excavation. That's a little view, another aerial view. You can see our trench in the bottom left corner, and that's just outlined. That's the number of chicken pits, and all across that area is just stratigraphy and settlement. And at Cara Burun, on the left is a recent Google Earth image. Our test trench is marked there, the little dot. And an aerial image from 1963 shows what we think is a digging of pits to plant olive trees. And what we have truncating and cutting our features at the Cara Burun site, you can see the circular pits in that are colored there. Those are the olive pits, and we have linear features which are plow damage. So the features are cut into bedrock, luckily, but the plow damage, when we look at a section of Cara Burun, you can really see how much has been lost through the plowing, as indicated by the dotted lines and the arrows. You know, there is very ephemeral archaeology left, and if we hadn't had the area protected and they'd have carried on plowing, and we understand from the farmer the plowshare depth is about 25-30 centimeters. This plow, you know, there wouldn't be much left, even less than we found. So the intervention was timely. The amount of damage done is significant. So I'll talk a little bit about the stratigraphy and the phasing. Müge's shown you some of the slides of the site. Just happenstance, really, that the place Müge chose to place the trench was so significant. The stratigraphy, although damaged, is very insightful. So we have a multiple settlement phases. The most obvious one with the 6 buildings that revealed, 6 buildings that Müge discussed, is just one settlement phase and is associated with the construction of the big ditch. There are other settlement phases. We put a small sondage through the surface that the buildings are on, and there are several settlement phases beneath that. And after the settlement phase went out of use, the main settlement phase, there were a couple of phases after that when it was abandoned, and the buildings collapsed. The settlement moved away and then came back, and there was a period when the previous buildings, which are now leveled, were dug into and quarried for we think quarried from mud brick and limestone. And there was a phase of industry when we're making materials for building work. So we've got quite a few phases. The latest phase, of which there are very few remnants left, mostly lost to plow damage. There's some plaster surfaces and the bases of truncated plaster basins. We don't have a date for that, but we have got a string of carbon dates from the Oxford lab, which are very helpful. So our phase A, which is this phase when there's a limestone kiln and pits for mixing plaster and the quarrying of mud brick from the previous buildings. We've got a good string of carbon dates, and that's when the ditch is basically filled up with domestic waste deposits over time. So you're about 7,850 plus or minus Cal BC. That's lying over a phase of when the main settlement was abandoned. There seems to be an event where there's a sudden abandonment, buildings collapse, the buildings erode down, and that's about 7976. We've got a very good date from a hearth between two collapsing buildings of pistachio, burnt pistachio, which gave us a good date. And when the settlement's in use and the ditch is starting to fill, we think that's going on about 8,100 to 8,000. And the layer, what we call phase D, is the laying down of this wide crushed limestone plaster surface, which spreads out 13 meters from the ditch. And that's built immediately over another half, which gave us a data of about 8,100 plus minus. And underneath that layer of plaster and limestone, which is acting as a very compact surface, there were a series of other settlement phases and collapse. And you get a sequence of post holes, then there's occupation, dumping, and erosion and collapse. So there's a sequence there. So we're going back. We didn't have suitable material that gave us dates from some of the earliest phases, but we're at 8,100 plus minus. And in all, we've got about 6 settlement phases. Our current dating is running from about 7,800 to 8,300. But we don't think we've got the most recent phases, and we don't think we've got the earliest phases, just in our test trench. The phase of building, construction, and industry is represented here in this phase plan. The north part of the trench at the top is the ephemeral remnants of another occupation phase, which we don't have a date for yet, but that should be predating 7,800. And what we have at the bottom is an intense area of industry. You have a central feature with a lot of stone, which is a kiln, and around it a sequence of plaster mixing pits. The mixing burnt limestone into a thicker plaster, and then some smaller pits where they're making a very, very fine plaster. This is for rendering walls, we think. And on the right-hand side at the bottom there, you've got a lot of pits, and those pits are exactly over the buildings from the main settlement phase. And my interpretation is that they're quarrying out the mud brick and building material and the crushed limestone to reuse. And that's clearly about making materials for more building, which we think is very nearby. So it just seems from the series of settlements, phasing and the stratigraphy we're seeing, that there's just a shifting settlement in a very local area. There's a phase plan which shows the main buildings, the 6 main buildings. Interesting, you know, quite a bit of intact stratigraphy, and quite fascinating. The building, you can see the ditch, the line of the ditch at the bottom. As Müge said, it's 2 meters deep. It varies in width. It's a little irregular, between 3, 4 to 5 meters wide in places. The building next to the ditch is oval in construction, and the building extends into the west-facing section on the right-hand side there. And it's a platform that has a nice mud brick wall around it, which I think was a low mud brick wall. And then you've got tips, angled tips of limestone filling the space inside the brick wall, which look like they've been tipped in from baskets. So it's a very solid surface, and abutting it at 2 circular buildings with thick walls. And to the north, on the right-hand side, you can see a lot of stones, a sort of sub-square building, perhaps with a stone platform, and built into it, internal ovens. So quite interesting, and 2 more buildings which are very degraded, appear to be mud brick walls, shape maybe circular, maybe sub-square. It's difficult to see with what's left. Those have suffered more from the ploughing damage. Now, the buildings weren't all built at once, but they did stand contemporaneously. They respect each other. And the first buildings basically were around an open, a sort of courtyard where there were plaster-lined basins, external ovens. And a couple of these were covered over when additional buildings were put in. So you might interpret that as building expansion, perhaps, with a sort of multi-generational settlement. They're putting more buildings in. And Müge showed that picture of the mud brick, but that's the platform building. That's the wall that surrounded it, and it's infilled. But clear use of mud brick. And there were a variety of building techniques. So the circular buildings immediately next to this building had a large limestone foundations, and then externally mud brick that was finely plastered. And the wooden posts are being used for construction where there's a depth of soil and stratigraphy, which is to the north of the trench. So they're not digging posts into the bedrock, and literally under this platform building and the circular buildings, it's down onto bedrock. Now, this apparent reuse of mud bricks is interesting, because when this building, this platform building, goes out of use, the wall collapses into the ditch, and there may also have been along the edge of the ditch. It's quite deep. There may have been a low mud brick wall along the edge, and the wall collapses in. And we got a carbon date from charcoal in the wall, which gives us 8272 plus minus KBC. Well, that's earlier than everything else stratigraphically in the ditch, and I suspect it's coming from an early date, coming from the reuse of mud brick. What it does tell us in this immediate area, if they're quarrying, is the dates you're going back to in the stratigraphy in this immediate area. And there's just a close up of a couple of the basins in the courtyard area, which are then backfilled deliberately and covered up as building expands. And in one of them, you can see an antler tool in place. when the buildings go out of use, there seems to be a very rapid event. And there were two thick layers of silt landed on this lovely plaster floor that the people are living on. And then the buildings go out of use and they slowly decay. And we're lucky in a way because the slow decay means as a wall collapses, plaster falls face down, and we're able to recover that. So there's a sort of a thicker limestone plaster, and then we've got some very fine finishing plaster, which were painted. So I think we've got black, red, and brown as colors. So the buildings must have been very interesting to look at when they were standing. The abandoned buildings, the people were still in the very immediate area, because as the buildings are abandoning, there are still a couple of hearths. So I think they're using the abandoned buildings as windbreaks and just shifting settlement, maybe just, a couple of dozen meters. And there seems to be, from the carbon dating, settlement may have moved far enough away that they stopped dumping things into the ditch for a period. So how rapid was this possible inundation that might have led to the abandonment? Well, outside the doorway in the porch of one of the buildings, when we removed these thick layers of silt, were basically what we describe as a toolkit. A toolkit for someone making tools, a napper, which consisted of a couple of the only complete obsidian blades we found, a worn antler with a flat stone, a boar tusk, and another piece of antler, almost as if someone was working. And then we haven't worked out, I hope we can do tests maybe this year, what caused the landing of all this silt, whether it's heavy rains which are washing it and really damaging the mud brick of the buildings, or whether it's wind blown. Hopefully we can find that out. But it happened fast enough that this toolkit was left where it was, and no one came back. So 40 centimeters silt across the site, and it's abandoned, but no one's going very far. So maybe it's just seen as an opportunity to move and start again. And on that, we'll talk a little bit about the ditch. We've excavated about an area about 30 meters wide. The geophysics, the magnetometry is extremely useful, even though there's a lot of metal contamination on the site from the agriculture and the buildings. We got a good insight into it. So this ditch is about 80 meters long. It's curving. It does not, from the geophysics, appear to be in separate sections. It appears to be continuous, and it's got vertical sides, more or less. There are large indents where bits of limestone have been levered out or collapsed, and it appears. My interpretation is not. It doesn't appear to be defensive. I think the main thing is it's a quarry for the crushed limestone, of which you need a great volume to make this surface, which is 30 meters wide. So if you're thinking this is being spread from the ditch to form a hard surface for building on, then you're ending up with a sort of oval shape, 80 meters long, 50 meters wide, where you've got room for sort of 30, 40 houses, I would think. And the ditch itself, then, it seems almost immediately, there's not much evidence of the ditch being kept clean. It seems to be then used for domestic waste dumps, ash, burnt bone, etc. And we're also getting soil eroding in from one side, and as the buildings go out of use, we've got mud brick erosion coming in from the the building side, the inside of the ditch, if you like. And it takes about 200, 250 years to fill, but that may not have been a continuous process. Just to go back to the geophysics, there's the magnetometry. What I've done in blue, you can see the dotted line shows our trench. What I've done in blue is mark out more clearly the ditch as appears on the geophysics. And there appear to be other ditches as well. And what's interesting is they seem to respect each other. And the ditch we have partially excavated runs up to and seems to abut another ditch. And if these are ditches which are related to producing construction material, then we can see that there have been several episodes of this. And I suspect that given the bays, given what we know about the trade and communication by sea that's going on, I'd suspect that the earlier phases of this site, probably nearer the bay. Now, the whole area is messed up by chicken pits, but when it's safe from a kind of contamination, biological contamination point of view, we do have a chance to look to empty some of these chicken pits and see if we can find the earliest phases on the site. And I don't suspect we're there yet. Because at the end of the ditch we've excavated, where it abuts those ditches, there's deep stratigraphy there. We know because the chicken pits are going through it and bringing up material. So there's a lot still to explore. There's the ditch as we started to take deposits out and remove this later phase of industry. And there's a lot of material in it. We've got a series of very good dates. And there we go down. And I think we're coming up to something like 1,700 separate contexts and deposits from this ditch. As we get lower down to the bottom, this seems that the ditch is starting to fill up with deposits when the buildings are still in use, we think. And this illustrates very well the ditch at this position is sloping slightly to the west, and rainwater is basically running down the center, making a bit of a gully. On the left-hand side, the mud brick is eroding from buildings and walls, and on the right-hand side, you have erosion from the soil of the neighboring fields coming in. And this is a constant dumping of domestic waste, and then rain washing material in over time. So I imagine it must have been like a giant compost heap over time. That we've got a lot of, I think, small vertebrate bones, lizards and so forth going on. And just for scale, there's the team working in 2017, and you can see the scale of the ditch. So this was basically running for, as I say, around 80 meters. So it's a substantial settlement. And we, as Müge said, we did find human remains in the ditch. These are intriguing. I'm generally intrigued by what happens to human remains in the Neolithic as I read more about it. And having experienced most forms of burial and treatment of human remains in my archaeological career, this has interested me greatly. In the upper deposits of the ditch, a few individual bones in these domestic waste, domestic debris contexts, mostly cranial fragments and hand and feet bones, which seem to me consistent with coming from the cleaning of living space or buildings. But down near the bottom of the ditch, we've got two large clusters of remains which are coming in as dumps. It seems to me a number of probable basketfuls of material coming in and being dropped into the ditch. And these have got human remains in them, and also building material, specifically material from roofing. And there are two main deposits, and these stratigraphically, they're on top of each other. There's a whole series of deposits. And the one you see here is contains the remains of a sub-adult plus adult bones. Müge showed you the picture of an intact arm, some vertebrae and ribs, and associated with were there are other bones as well in a sort of mounded dump deposit. Now, the property of remains I find intriguing. I've ruled a lot of possible things out, such as burial cuts in the ditch, etc. And the only thing that seems to make sense from the properties of the remains to me is that they were already dry when they were dumped, but they had tissue connection of some kind or wrapping. And when they fall, there is some fracturing, and some of the bones are coming apart at sutures, and it's really indicative that these are dry going in. The only scenario I see that fits the properties of these remains and the context is that there's some kind of, they're preserved in some way, and they've been removed from a building that's collapsed and burnt. And there are male, female, and sub-adults present. And the type of building material that's indicative of roof material is this. They've got impressions of leaves and reeds. And having Ishmael as our local builder in traditional materials on site is fantastic, because you get a real insight in how the reeds are used to construct mud roofs. So the human remains quite intriguing. Preserved, kept in buildings, in roof space, and then at some point disposed of. And a little bit on the Cara architecture as a contrast, only a kilometre away from Tatlısu. Müge and I had bets on when we saw the shape of the building, was it earlier, was it later? And one carbon date, which I think is from olive or pistachio, appears to be in a secure context in this foundation trench, but it's quite a bit earlier than Tatlısu, which was a surprise. Well, we haven't got much, we've just got a small trench, but it's a trapezoid building. It appears to me the construction was as follows. A central post is dug into the bedrock, a deep hole dug into the bedrock, and then the corner posts are measured off, and then the hand dug foundation trench goes around the corner posts and really shallows out on the porch. We've got two door posts, and it seems deliberately shallowed for the door entrance. And there's equidistance between posts and wall length. So they seem to be using a measure, a layout rope or a rod or something like that. And in fact, the length of the wall, if you subtract the door at the front of the building, is the same as the back. So it's only the width of the door that makes it form a trapezoid. And it contrasts very, I think, nicely with Tatlısu. Tatlısu, everything about Tatlısu says to me that everything's communal. Communal ditch digging, the laying of this massive surface, and the buildings going onto it. And Cara, somehow the architecture seems very kind of, not quite individual, but maybe sort of familial in the way it's built. And of course, there's a great number of tools. So is it on its own? I don't think so. What was used to jam the posts upright, and what looks either small posts or planks set into the foundation trench. A lot of these stone tools, round balls and blades, and they're really using them as wedges, I think, to set their posts in. And then, interestingly, it looks like the limestone dug from the foundation trench and the post holes, and 2 pits, which you can see in the top left and the bottom right corners of this building. Those are mixing pits, and they're mixing the crushed limestone, I think, to make a mortar, which and they're laying it as a surface outside the building, as a floor surface. And of course, in the north, top right corner, which is northeast, you've got 2 offset posts instead of a big corner post, although it's been truncated by an olive pit. So we wonder whether there's a window or perhaps a ladder. So intriguing, different tools, also a different time frame, but a trapezoid house a kilometre away from Tatlısu Reserve, so there's more to find there. And that is the end of some of the details. There's some things to think about, hopefully.
Thank you very much. It was a great talk, and I have many questions, but I just want to give the opportunity to the others to start with their questions. There was a question from Eva Bosch. Why were the buildings round?
Well, that's a yes. Could take that question in several ways. Well, it's interesting. They both, the very round buildings abut what appears to be platform. The interior surfaces, the plaster is worn away over time, I think probably just from cleaning. But inside those buildings, there don't appear to be remains of any hearths that we found, where you do find that in the exterior and internally in a couple of the other buildings. So difference in function, I don't know. Is the platform serve a purpose of a very solid foundation for processing, threshing, something like that? And the round buildings are for storage, don't know. Not sure. But it will be good when we, I think, do some more work on botanical finds and look at the context distribution. It might give us some clues. Unfortunately, the upper part of the platform building is heavily truncated by ploughing, so there's no features really other than the construction itself. And if I can be more helpful than that.
Thank you. There's, I think, the next question from Gilla. She asked, the Cara seems out of place in Cypriot PPNA context. Any resemblance in terms of material culture or other features to Klimonas or Asprocremnos?
Müge, do you know if it compares to anything?
Not that I know of.
Maybe Giller has any suggestions herself?
It does look out of place.
Oh, sorry. No, I didn't see anything. So I was really wondering, and maybe it's my mistake. The lithics looked different, and first of all, the architectural plan is very different and almost square in the PPNA in Cyprus. So a lot of questions. It's very fascinating. Congratulations, by the way. So I just wanted to hear what you made out of this new evidence.
Cara, yes.
Yes, Cara, exactly.
Yes, Cara is very interesting. Something we didn't show is also it's again on the 15-meter, roughly 15-meter elevation along the coast. And this seems to be all these early sites occurrence, if you want to earmark for this kind of sites. And along the edge, on the rock, there are vessels that's been dug out, not vessel, but they are pits dug out straight into the rock, and they are linear. We don't know what they are, but I saw exactly the same thing long before in Karpaz Peninsula. So perhaps Cara Burun is not unusual. Perhaps there are more, we just need to investigate them. But at the moment, you're right, the evidence is thrilling. I don't know, the material seems also very different that we collected from the surface. And lack of obsidian is another question. More questions we seem to answer in Cypriot prehistory, more questions are coming after.
Yeah, I lost the bet, by the way. So I thought that when we sent a carbon date off for Cara Burun, I thought it would come back as something more recent than Tatlısu. I mean, we need to try and get more carbon dates.
Yeah, absolutely.
Expand that trench. It could be it's one date, so it could be it's rogue, but we discounted some other things because of the interface with the plow soil that we could have used for dating, and went for something secure, but it could be intrusive. So there's more work to do there, but it's fascinatingly different.
Absolutely. Congratulations.
Thank you, Chida.
Thank you. John Clark, she's got a question to Müge. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Marion. Hi, Müge. It's lovely to see you again. It's been a long time. Just to tell everyone, we were both students under Trevor and Eddie, so it's good to see you. Is it possible to put up that slide of the Pottery Neolithic site right back at the beginning? I think it was slide 2, just for everyone to see.
Okay, let's see.
It's slide 2 or 3. It's the pottery sherds. Sorry, it's kind of important because it's just simply amazing.
Sure, it was a fascinating site, and I'm really sorry.
It's all gone. Has the whole this has it
majority
all gone?
of it is gone, unfortunately.
Okay, so you will all see this sherd with a figure with upraised arms. You knew I was going to say this, didn't you, Müge?
No, but I hesitated in putting this, given the shortage of time, and I thought Joan is going to be there and she'll be very interested in this.
I am absolutely blown away by it. I'm just completely blown away by it, because you know the kind of heredity of this, don't you? I mean, we could trace it all the way back to Göbekli if we wanted to, but we don't have to go that far. We can just start at Ainul Jaba, for example, 6th millennium, or Çatal, even if we want to stay in the right area, 7th millennium. Or we could go to Tenta, So we have this image now appearing at your ceramic Neolithic site with ripple decoration. And you know what ripple decoration is, of course, or maybe not. So Eddie did this, Eddie Peltenberg did, so the typology of decoration at Vrisi is one of the only ways, because Vrisi, Epictetus Vrisi is a site that is really well carbon dated. And we know that ripple decoration is really late in the Vrisi sequence. It comes in maybe about 4,100, even down to 3,900 BC. Now, your date of 5,600 is really early. And of course, we don't know the context of that date, which is, sad because we don't know what happens in the north, but at Vrisi, we know that this kind of decoration, ripple decoration, is very late in the ceramic Neolithic sequence for Cypriot ceramic Neolithic pottery, with a figure that at Kirikatia appears on a bowl on the front of one of the Kirikatia volumes and is probably not far off your 5,600 date. So we're starting to kind of pull together really amazing threads of you know, a motif that goes across media and across time and is clearly understood for what that motif is, you know, in different contexts. So, I mean, I think I just wanted to say that it's an absolutely amazing, oh my God, I'm just amazed to see it amongst all of this, what I would call traditional ceramic Neolithic and Chalcolithic pottery. So
I'm glad
No,
to see this too. Thank you for.
I mean,
all
do you
the-
have a view on it, Müge? Have you looked and thought about it?
Not the way you did, actually.
Well, I only just looked at it tonight, but it's brilliant. So thank you.
You're
Yeah, it's
welcome.
really
excellent.
As Ian said, most of the time we are so busy running to say from one site to another that we don't even have the luxury to put up our feet and read some articles. And today, in today's lecture, I was a little bit hesitant because I'm not well read as much as I should be of what's happening around and up to date.
I would just like to say that motif demonstrates how connected Cyprus was to a wider mainland Neolithic that continued in a kind of social memory way for a very long period of time. And a lot of people don't agree with me, and they've criticized me, and they've stopped me publishing on this, but that sherd demonstrates to me that connection that Cyprus had with a wider mainland kind of worldview is absolutely clear, and it goes all the way down into the ceramic Neolithic.
Well, you would be interested that this one burial we had, we actually sent it for DNA analysis in Turkey. But unfortunately, no DNA was retrieved from it. So that would have been very interesting to also confirm your thoughts on this.
Yeah,
It's really unfortunate about this site, the depths of deposit, incredible depths of deposit. And you know, the continuation between, I think there may be a ceramic at the bottom. So we're looking at a site, destroyed site of a ceramic, Neolithic and Chalcolithic. It would have been dream site for you to excavate.
oh my gosh, it's a tragedy, Müge. It's a complete tragedy. And
I think we all come to Cyprus.
It's
Tragedy
amazing. Thank you so much for showing it.
Yeah, so can we continue with the question from Janan? I have a question about the protection of the site. Are there any plans to apply for World Heritage List designation? Would this help bring awareness to the site and funds from international agencies like the World Monument Funds?
UNESCO is a difficult one because we are not the legal government, and it has to be legal government applying for it. But when we established our excavation, we used London Museum excavation techniques because it's more acceptable. When we were doing our carbon dating, although it was more expensive, we sent it to Oxford. We are trying to do the set up a kind of, if you like, an example, a good example of how it should be practiced. And when we're going to establish the Archaeopark, we will do and we will use whatever is necessary for UNESCO, that in the future, sometime in the future, maybe another 50 years or so, that everything will be ready for UNESCO. World Heritage Fund, I know they funded some sites in Famagusta, medieval sites. To be honest, I'm so discouraged by all these applications that we have done in the past. We've done one to American Institute of Archaeologists, that it's not happening. That in the end, we decided that the Archaeopark and the little souvenir shop may continue, at least with a little money, little finances, to all these works that we are doing. Because problem is the continuation. So even with little money, we know every year that Müge or Nurcan will come to Cyprus, and for 10 days she will study the artifacts and go back. And so far we are unable to do that. So unfortunately, international agencies, I don't know, maybe you want to give it a try for us, but it's tiring for me. I stopped looking outside now.
Thank you for your reply. Sorry, I don't have my video on. I have bad connection. But yeah, I appreciate your forward thinking and to protect the site. And I think showing an example to the world might be one way to go. And yeah, I'm very interested in this. And so if there's anything I can do to help or ways to move forward, I think this is really important, and I appreciate all the work that you have all been doing. Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll talk soon anyway with you. Send me a message.
Definitely. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
There's another question from Mert. Are there publications concerning the underwater archaeological finds and the ancient harbor you presented?
We have plans, but it was just last summer that we discovered it, and we want to work a little bit more on it because we were bewildered when we found it. We didn't expect to come across something like this. And then after we thought, why are we surprised? The area is so rich in archaeology. And you may say that prior to 74, not much work was done in Karpas Peninsula, but this area of Akanthou, there has been archaeological work. There's been American team excavating a late Bronze Age site. Simenoğlu did work. In Balalan, there was work done. Hacı Savas did a survey. So it was not really completely virgin land. So in the near future.
Are there any more questions? At the moment, I can't see the hands up somewhere. If there are none, I would like to ask questions about, yeah, sorry, Alan. Yeah, go ahead. Your microphone.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Excellent.
great. Müge, great to see you. Great presentation. I have two real quick questions. One's very boring, but since you did 100% sieving, do you have a rough estimate of the amount of chipstone you recovered? Because I'm trying to compare this to Ias Yoricus, and just for example, we've got about 300,000 pieces based on 20% sieving. So I was just curious, as a comparison, if you have a ballpark figure. You said you had about 5,000 obsidian artifacts.
Yes, it's not the Flint studies is not yet completed, but we have crates and crates full of. I don't know if Nurcan would like to give us an estimate number. She's here, but it's crates full of one room full crates full of.
Okay, so a lot, yeah. Yeah, and a second question, just a comment. I'm really intrigued by the platform structure near the ditch. As you know, we've got a very similar one at Iasiorchis that we are, I suspect it was some sort of dwelling, but it's our only structure that actually has an internal hearth in it. So it's a great analogy because there aren't many of those in the ceramic. So terrific work. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yes, I noticed, Alan, the similarity with Iasiorchis, I think, some of the architectural features. But it's interesting at Tatlısu, the chipstone and the obsidians in every context, the ditch context, in little layers of occupation inside the buildings, outside the buildings, inside the hearths, and in the dump deposits of waste material.
Same with us, actually. No discrete patterning. They're in pit fill, they're in colluvium, no patterning.
Yeah.
But of course, we only have 72 pieces of obsidian. So
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, we don't want to boast, but we've one half section pit at the end of the ditch, so it's half the pit, and we had 90 pieces of obsidian from half of the pit.
That's worth boasting about.
Yeah, so I mean, if you take that, it's across all contexts. So if we spread that across the estimate size of the site, if it's consistent, then what are we talking? 200,000, 250,000 pieces if you were able to excavate the whole site as we see it.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, one interesting thing, Müge mentioned there's a lot of nice bays to shelter boats along here. I don't think there's any accident that the Akanthou coastline has been used for millennia. And from what we understand, there's a good current comes from Anatolia, from the mainland, pretty much due south at a few knots. So it seems it's, the vast volume of obsidian is being landed, and it's coming from Anatolia. It's a natural harborage, and not just in the pre-ceramic Neolithic, but I think consistently over the millennia. It's a direct route.
That's very interesting. Thank you. Chile is asking about the total weight of obsidian from Akanthou.
Nurcan, is she there to answer?
Nearly 3 kilos.
Thank you.
I wrote it actually.
I missed it.
It's okay.
Sorry. Yeah, I saw it. Okay, no, sorry, Nurcan. So, are there any other questions from the audience? If not, I would like to ask you about the intensity of occupation of the houses. Do you have any evidence for the layers inside the buildings, or is it year-round occupied? How many buildings were contemporaneous, and how densely was the whole area occupied? Are there any?
Well, it seems initially you seem to have 3 buildings.
Okay.
And then more are built, which respect and abut to the other buildings. So I think they're all standing, when you get to 6, they're all standing at the same time. And they go out of use at the same time. Now, of course, after 10,000 years, this hard crushed limestone stroke plaster surface all the houses are built on still functions perfectly when you're cleaning it. So in terms of interiors, the 2 circular houses, the interiors have been cleaned away. So you're down to bedrock in some places of the underlying natural soil. But I think the plaster surface is so easy to clean, you do not have much in terms of building interior occupation deposits. You have slithers. So we're talking 5 centimeters accumulated against the wall floor junction, in which you might find a fragment of obsidian blade, or I think we found a fragment of stone bowl. But I think generally they're well cleaned, so there's not much to find in the interiors. Where we're finding a lot of the occupation material, the dumps into the ditch, and in the earlier phases they're dumped down slope. So and in the quarrying pits, they refill those with